She sat on a bar stool, sipping vodka and Coke, and waited. She casually glanced at her watch and noted that her friend was already 15 minutes late. Thoughts flashed through her mind about the wisdom of this trick. The anticipation increased her nervousness and foreboding. Carrie looked around the bar. It was an ordinary lounge bar in an ordinary hotel. A handful of customers sat there, listening to the tinkling piano fill the background behind the noise of their chatter. She sat alone at the end of the long counter, trying to remain aloof and inconspicuous. The looks from a couple of visitors made her nervous. They looked at her the way a predator would, perhaps seeing her as an easy target. A single, vulnerable woman, or perhaps a call girl. The way she was dressed and the fact that she was alone in a hotel bar gave predators something to think about. Where is she? She looked at her watch again. Now she was 20 minutes late. She took a second sip of her vodka and Coke, the warmth of the cool liquid warming her throat as she looked around the bar. She caught the eye of a man sitting facing her at one of the tables. He raised his glass and smiled. She blushed and then looked away, but she felt that he was watching her. She tried not to look away, somewhat enjoying the attention, but not wanting to intentionally attract or encourage it. Her phone beeped twice. This was the message. She rummaged through her bag and pulled out a smartphone. A few clicks of your fingers and text filled the screen. It was short and sweet, which was strange to Grace. She usually liked to rattle off line after line of gory details if she couldn't call and talk. Sorry, honey, I can't tell you what happened. Something really important. G. She looked at the text message and her shoulders slumped. All the trouble she had spent organizing this evening was now a waste of time. She dialed Grace's number. She waited, and a beep sounded in her ear, but it sounded for several seconds without an answer. Then he broke off. She tried again, and received the usual message that the number could not be connected. She left a message for her friend. Grace, call me. Why the fuck is it so important to screw everything up at this late stage? Call me. Carrie threw the phone back into her purse. She stared at her drink, her mind racing as she tried to figure out her next move. Grace was with her every time she ventured outside her marriage. In fact, she was the one who encouraged her along this path. This was the first time in almost 2 years that she had not appeared. What the hell was so important, and more important than what they had planned for tonight? She felt angry and disappointed. She hasn't had sex for a week or more, or has it been longer? She tried to remember, well, maybe it was longer because she couldn't remember being with Gary, but it didn't matter, did it? Carrie was 33 years old and had been married for 8 years to Pete, who was 2 years older than her. They met at a mutual friend's party one Christmas and hit it off. They dated for a little over a year before they realized it was serious. A year later, they got married. Their careers were just beginning to blossom, so they decided to leave, starting a family for a few years. Maybe it was this decision that led Carrie to this situation now. She took a sip of vodka and noticed that the man was still casually looking in her direction. This time she smiled back at him, just a fleeting smile, but enough for him to see. She knew how to play the game, and she wondered how long it would be before he approached her. She licked her lips slowly, knowing he was watching her, and a wicked thought struck through her, causing her heart to beat a little faster and a tingling sensation to begin deep within. She sipped her drink, wondering again how she got here. Her husband, Pete, was away for a couple of days for work. He was a safety consultant and was hired to work on risk assessments for work on specialist work sites such as substations and railway lines. He traveled regularly around the UK and also made occasional trips to Europe. It was these trips that gave Carrie the opportunity to lose her way. Her friend Grace was too eager to have a friend with her, especially after her own marriage ended in divorce 3 years ago. Grace was caught in her own bed with 2 men when her husband sent an investigator to investigate his cheating wife and her lovers. Grace, although shocked and surprised, was unrepentant, and when it was revealed that he had been watching her for weeks, she realized there was no point in trying to defend something that had no justification. Her divorce went off without any fireworks, although it did affect her ability to maintain her connections. It was then that Carrie supported her, and as a friend, she felt it was right to offer her that support. After the initial shock and fallout from her divorce, the 2 friends began meeting occasionally for dinner. These outings soon took advantage of the fact that Carrie's husband, Pete, was away, so there was no need to return home early. The evenings were fun. They acted like single women together, with Grace encouraging Carrie to let her hair down and have some fun. She remembered the first time it happened. They were in a club that they seemed to use quite regularly when they were accosted by a couple of guys. Drinks flowed freely. There was a lot of flirting and dancing with a lot of physical contact. Carrie noticed that Grace was really into it when the guy she was with put his lips on hers. After that, everything was a blur until she realized that they were naked in the hotel room, and it was almost 3 a.m. She remembered feeling the presence of one of the guys next to her when she looked back and saw Grace having sex with the other one. She shook her head, bringing herself out of her thoughts. The thoughts she had then were confused, erotic, and mixed with shame, excitement, and betrayal. It took some time to recover from that first time, in fact, almost 3 months, but then it happened again and again. It was now common for two women to go hunting for men. Early thoughts about her husband were replaced in her nightly walks by pure lust. Now, no thoughts of betrayal were allowed into her mind. She was only looking for the lust that strangers could give her. Tonight was supposed to be another fun night, and now her friend had pulled out at the last minute. Such a disappointment. She tried to remember how long it had been since she last had sex with Pete. Of course, it was only a couple of weeks ago, but she couldn't remember. She had been seeing Grace a lot lately since Pete had been on several trips, so she had been with other men. But with Pete? Something haunted her deep down. Something she couldn't bring to the fore, but it was there. She finished her drink and placed the glass on the mat by the counter. The bartender looked at her, she nodded, and he turned to pour her another. "I'll pay for it, if possible." His deep voice came right behind her. She turned around and saw a man. He was about 180 centimeters tall, had short salt and pepper hair, looked slim and fit, confident, with deep brown eyes. Carrie felt herself drawn to the man's gaze as if he were already inside her. She felt a shiver of pleasure and knew he was the one she wanted tonight. Excitement washed over her, and she felt it. He noticed it too. "Chalk it up to me." The bartender nodded and walked away. He's seen it all before. A single married woman and an experienced womanizer preparing for seduction. It disgusted him, but he thought that sometimes women got what they deserved. This girl looked like a player herself, which, in his eyes, made the situation even worse. At home or somewhere else, there was some poor soul who thought she was out with a friend or sitting at home pining for him. Yes, he was disgusted that people could betray so easily. It was obvious that the man was making his move, and his advances were well received. He turned away, wiping his glass, and watched the scene unfold. The next hour passed in the usual routine of the chase. The bartender watched the couple act out their roles. The stalker flirted and pushed her buttons, and she flirted back, laughing at his clever talk. Giving him their smile and something else, they slowly enveloped each other. Carrie completely forgot about Grace as her admirer teased and flattered her. Her desire was growing, and she really needed him. She remembered the last guy. When was that? Oh yeah, it was that young guy from the Hilton. Grace introduced them to two guys during a sales trip. Yes, it was a fun evening. It occurred to her that she remembered her nights with strangers, not Pete. It was strange. She came back to the present when her admirer placed his hand on her knee. He rubbed her knee gently as they chatted, and she wasn't sure how long he did it for, but it still felt good. The bartender watched the man approach. Step by step, he won her trust. He saw it, and it could only end one way. They all knew it too. After another portion of vodka and Coca-Cola, Carrie was tipsy enough to relax because of her chosen one. She slid off the stool and melted into his arms as he held her tightly and planted a friendly but firm kiss on her lips. The bartender watched as the kiss was reciprocated. He knew the next step would be his number. The man waved to the bartender as he placed his glass on the bar mat and left a bill under the glass as a tip. With a quick movement, he picked up their glasses and placed the tip in his pocket, smiling grimly as he watched the couple make their way towards the lobby. The kissing began in earnest in the elevator on the way to his room. Now his hands were touching Carrie gently but insistently. He was in control of the situation. The chase was almost over, and now his prize was in his hands. They staggered to his room, kissing and giggling as they nearly tumbled out the door. Clothes were shed as they approached the large bed. The lips closed, and soon they were naked. He was a skilled lover, and at about 2 a.m. they started to cool down a bit. "I'll call you a taxi if you want. If you need to be somewhere." He smiled at her. "Thanks. That would be nice. But first I need to take a shower." "Continue. I'll call." After taking a shower, she soapied herself from head to toe and soaked in the warm water. Her thoughts slowly tasted reality in small pieces. She wondered what happened to Grace. It was okay, although she still had fun tonight. Then she realized there was no call from Pete. Maybe she missed him, but that was unusual, he always called. She dried herself off with a large, fluffy towel and began to put her clothes back on. While putting on her makeup, she opened her phone, but there were no missed calls from Pete. She kissed her lover and left the room, heading down the hallway towards the elevators. She began to feel a nagging doubt in her head that sent shivers down her spine. Something was wrong. She pressed the elevator call button and waited in the quiet corridor. All her thoughts were confused. My body was sore after a really good night of sex, but my mind was racing. She winced when she heard the bell, signaling the arrival of the elevator. She walked inside and watched as the floor numbers descended towards the first floor. As she walked through the lobby, the receptionist on duty smiled at her, as if she knew who she was. Carrie climbed into a black taxi on the side of the road and watched the city lights float by as she was driven home. Home, she thought. Pete won't be back for 2 days. She still had plenty of time to spend alone, unless Grace showed up. She sent her a message. "Had a great night with a real stud. Sorry you missed it. Call me in the morning." 2. She leaned back in her chair and replayed the previous night's sexual escapades in her head. She had his calling card if she wanted a repeat. The taxi stopped at her house. It was dark except for the security lights. She paid the driver and trudged down the path to her door. She slowly walked inside and dropped her bag on the living room floor, kicked off her heels, and headed to bed. Carrie felt a pounding in her head that would not stop, seemingly continuous and persistent. She hesitantly opened her eyes and looked at the clock next to her bed. The noise was coming from behind her front door. "It's 8 a.m. She climbed out of bed with difficulty, threw on a robe, and headed towards the source of the noise. As she approached the door, she heard a voice. "Carrie, open up, it's me, Grace, open up." Okay, I'm going." She opened the door, and Grace rushed right past her. "He is here?" Grace turned and looked at her friend. "Carrie, is Pete here?" "Of course not. He is not here. He will return only in 2 days. Anyway, what happened to you last night?" Carrie turned to fill the coffee maker. Grace grabbed Carrie by the shoulders, turning her around and looking into her eyes. "Carrie, he knows. Pete knows. He knows everything. I don't know how, but he found out, and it was because of him that I couldn't go last night." "What? What does he knows mean?" "He can't know. How could he know?" That feeling came back again. Something was wrong. Wrong. He knows. Her mind was racing as Grace mumbled something to her, but Carrie didn't listen. Grace shook her. "Carrie, he was at my house last night." "What? This couldn't happen." Grace shook her again. "He was, and he knows. He has dates, names, photographs. He even has videos that he showed me." No, that's impossible. How could he have all this?" "I don't know, but he has it. He showed me some of this on his phone." "Oh my God, no, this is a nightmare. He just can't." This realization was already beginning to sink into Carrie's mind when there was a knock on the door. Grace headed for the door and returned with a grim expression on her face. "This is for you." She plopped down on a chair at the kitchen table. Carrie looked up and saw a middle-aged man behind Grace. He stepped forward. "Are you Carrie Franks?" he asked. "Yes, that's true," she answered in a trembling voice. He handed her a large envelope. "Thank you, ma'am." You've been served." He turned and headed straight to the door. Her fingers tore the envelope, causing its contents to spill across the table. There were also several photographs and a couple of CDs. Carrie began to shake at the sight of evidence of her infidelity. There was also a letter from Pete. She looked at his handwriting on the envelope and, trembling, slowly opened it. "Carrie, now you know that I know everything, and I really mean everything. A while ago, I found out what you and your girlfriend were doing when one of the guys you two were tumbling around in bed with mentioned his night of sex with two slutty girls. He was so impressed that he took some photos with his phone. Well, that was the beginning. Only you know how long this went on. Anyway, as soon as I found out, I stopped having sex with you. Did you notice this at all? Don't worry, unfaithful wife. Now you will be hurt. I sold the house first, so you have maybe a few weeks to get the hell out of here. No, I don't care about the courts or anyone else. Do you want your share? You should have found her first, creature. There is nothing left in the bank. I took everything away, so screw you. Do I care? No. You wanted it, and you got it. I emailed a selection of your most photogenic photos to everyone we know. The submit button must be pressed at 9 a.m. No, it can't be stopped. Everyone at your work will know about this by 9:01. I'm sure of it. You had fun having fun with your slutty friend. Well, now you might have to get really professional about it. I once loved you, but since I found out, you have killed all the feelings I ever had for you. But I will survive. I'm leaving, so good luck tracking me down. By the time you do this, I'm sure there will be nothing left to fight for. I took everything I need. The rest is all yours. Fuck you." Grace watched as her friend slowly sank to the kitchen floor, the life simply flowing out of her like air from a deflating balloon. "He left me, Grace. He left." Grace watched her friend and replayed in her head her own moment of realization many years ago when she realized what she had lost. Please like and subscribe to the channel and you will never be cheated on.